Welcome. My name is Kelly Riordan. I'm a classical musician turned creative entrepreneur, and this is the best platform for musicians that are looking to shape their career by thinking outside the box. So excited to have Brianne Paik with me today. She's the founder of the Piano Path, which, if you're not familiar, Brianne does amazing work on helping adult students to learn piano. And she's also one of my own favorite content creators on Instagram and TikTok. So I'm so excited about today. We were pumped at the beginning of this call because it's going to be a ton of fun. But Brianne, I want to start back at the very beginning, as always. At what age did you first learn an instrument?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on here, Kelly. I'm so excited to chat. I first started with the piano when I was about 6 years old. I come from a fairly large family. I'm one of 7 kids. My siblings were all taking piano lessons. And like around that age, most of us just started. And my parents just like really encouraged us to play. And so started when I was about 6. Yeah.
So growing up in a musical household, I'm like picturing, like Von Trapp family type get-togethers and dinner parties where there's music all over. Did you guys like to play together a lot, or was everyone kind of just operating individually?
Yeah. So when we were younger, we were more like individually just kind of like focused on our own things. But as we got older, that's when like the magic really started to happen and we got to play together. And now it's really fun to go home too. Like, we play lots of different instruments. I have several siblings who play the violin, and my brother plays the cello and guitar. And so it's fun just to have, like musical breakout sessions when we're at home. But yeah, growing up, we would experiment a little bit playing together, but it was more like individual stuff on our own.
That is so fun.
Yeah.
Were your parents also musical, or did they just decide that everyone in the family was going to take lessons?
Yeah. So what's funny is my dad plays the piano and is a great musician. My mom actually took piano lessons when she was younger and ended up quitting. And she like always just kind of regretted that her parents let her quit. And so I think like in her mind, she was like, I'm going to have my kids play the piano, like basically like fulfill the dream for her instead. So yeah, she did play when she was younger and but ended up quitting, and then all of us played. So
that's awesome. What a fun full household of music and sounds, and oh my gosh, that's so much fun. Are other siblings now also professional musicians, or have you kind of been the lone wolf?
I am kind of the lone wolf, actually.
Nice.
I say that a couple of my younger sisters teach music part-time. Okay. But I'm the one who's like, I feel like has gone into it more fully. We all still play, but like on various degrees. So, my younger sisters still teach a little bit, but I'm the one who's like gone full force into it.
That's awesome. Now, when we first got on, before we started recording, I know you kind of called your path into music as a profession unconventional, which I love. We love a different story. So how did you end up working in music or teaching? Was it something that kind of happened for you as you were younger and then built up, or came over time?
Yeah. So I guess it kind of goes back to when I was in middle school, and I actually, I had been taking piano lessons for a while, but I kind of got to this point where I was like, I don't know if I really want to continue with this. Like, I wasn't super into playing. I didn't really enjoy it that much. It was just something that was kind of a duty that I did. And I remember going and asking my mom if I could quit, and her response was, no. I mean, it would make sense based on her story and like wanting to keep her kids playing. And so I just remember thinking like, okay, I'll just like keep playing until like the end of high school, until like I can have the choice for myself and then, be done with it. But what actually something that really changed my story at the piano was when I discovered that I could actually play songs that I knew and I enjoyed playing. And I remember at that time was kind of when online sheet music was becoming really popular. So I remember my siblings and I would look up random songs off of the internet, and you could you could print off like the preview page for free. It would have the big words like preview on it, but we would just like look through the preview and still like play it. So yeah, I just remember like we would just have a stack of those papers of songs that like we knew and liked, and I started playing those and really just discovered that it was like the key that unlocked everything for me. Like it was like music and playing was something that I could truly enjoy when it was music that I liked, when it was, music from like soundtracks and music that I was hearing on the radio. And so that's like really what like was a turning point for me, was getting to experience the joy of playing music. And so from there, it was like I was hooked. Like I was never like going to stop. And in high school, we would have random people come to us, like me and my siblings, and like ask us to teach their kids piano. So I taught piano lessons, like actually when I was in high school, like very basic beginner lessons, like where you just like go through, like the Faber book or the Bastian book. Right. And so I taught through high school a little bit, just like as the way to make extra money. Because when you're in high school and you're teaching, $20 an hour is
it's like you struck gold.
Like, this is amazing. Like, so I taught a little bit in high school, and then I actually decided, I took a gap year after I graduated from high school, and I went to Taiwan and I taught English. Wow. So it was really interesting to go from teaching piano part-time to teaching English. And I think like we were teaching in very rural areas where there wasn't a lot of English. Like people knew like 5 English words, and we would be thrown into like a classroom where we'd have to teach them English. And so I think like looking back, that was a really kind of important chapter for me, because I learned how to like really simplify something. Like, okay, if these people do not understand anything that I'm saying, like how can I simplify something down into like its most basic form in order for them to understand? So that's just kind of an interesting piece to look back on and be like, wow, that actually like really helped me in the process. So yeah, I ended up teaching English in Taiwan. Actually, I did that for a couple of years. Wow. And then came back to the States and just kind of started teaching again, like I had before, like with teaching private lessons. And then just kind of built up my studio from there.
Wow. When you were in Taiwan, were you doing any teaching for music as well? Or did it like full break, like English has to have all of your time and attention?
Yes, yeah.
A big part of it.
I didn't teach music at all. It was just teaching English. But what's really fun is I lived with a team and we had a piano in our dorm. And so I was still like able to play. My team, like we loved singing like musicals and Broadway. Like we had like the book for Les Miserables, and like we loved keeping music a part of what we were doing.
That's awesome.
And that's kind of also just like a cool part of getting to bring music with me too. Like even though I wasn't teaching it, it was still a part of my life. Like it was still something that like brought me joy and was life-giving. So yeah.
That's awesome. What originally brought you to Taiwan? I know I was like taking a gap year, you probably explore a lot of different options, but was there something in particular that really like spoke to you in that opportunity?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what it was. So I was homeschooled. I grew up homeschooled, and it was connected with the homeschool group that I was a part of at the time. So it was like, we're sending English teachers over with this program to teach English in rural parts of Taiwan. So it wasn't like I necessarily like chose that one country. It's just that was like,
there's a connection there already.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
That is really cool. Now, as you transitioned back and started teaching again, was the studio your full-time income initially when you first moved back?
No, I was very much trying to figure out what I was doing with my life. And I knew that since I had taught piano lessons previously, I knew that was just a really simple way for me to make money and to have an income. So it started with just a few students here and there. And then I got this great idea at the time to put an ad on Craigslist, which sounds so sketchy now, but for some reason, like 7 or 8 years ago, it wasn't. And just like literally built my studio through an ad that I put on Craigslist.
Oh my gosh.
And then like word of mouth, and then just connections. And pretty soon I went from having 2 students to having like, I think my highest number was like 36 students I was teaching a week. So yeah, it really just exploded, and it felt like I had kind of just like pursued a dream. Like I was getting to teach and have my own business and run my own studio. And there was something I was going to say going back. Yeah, it didn't happen overnight, obviously. I started with a couple of students and then like slowly started building up. But yeah, it's been an adventure growing from 2 to 36.
So you said it was like a dream fulfilled. Have you always had this entrepreneurial spirit, like wanting to work independently, or is that something that kind of came after the fact?
Yeah, I've always had the desire just to have freedom, time freedom, financial freedom. And so I guess like that kind of coincides with each other, like being an entrepreneur, having your own business, like being able to decide how you run things. So I guess that's what kind of drew me into entrepreneurship was, I want to be the one creating things, and I want to be the one dreaming the dreams and working towards making them, come to life.
And it's important that this passion, and I know we kind of talked about this briefly too, but it's important to have this passion, especially because you are creating something, which we'll get to here, that is so out of the norm for lessons. And if you don't know what the Piano Path is, for anyone that's listening, Brianne has this incredible program for adult musicians or adult beginners that have never learned an instrument to start from scratch and learn, similar to what you're talking about, the things that you enjoy, like pop music and music that means something to them, that they're really excited about, in its most simplified form, and then scale and add on that. So it's a really cool path and program where someone could, practice 20 minutes a day and learn songs that they're excited about. Not with the goal of being a concert pianist, but for enjoyment and fun and like all of the things that, as you said, that you valued and you found as you were following this passion, like trying to figure out what this looks like. Yeah. Was it something that you just woke up one day and said, I really wish I could help more adult students, or were you already teaching adult students in your private lessons?
That's the funny thing. I was not teaching adults. So I got to the point, so I had grown my studio to the point where I couldn't really take on any more students. And because I value time freedom and financial freedom, like I kind of started to like, even though I was very excited by what I had accomplished, I was also like, oh no, I can't expand this any further. Like
there is one of me.
There's only one of me. And I don't want to be teaching every day until 9 p.m. or on weekends. And so I really was kind of starting to think of, or trying to kind of come up with some ideas of like, how could I expand this beyond one-on-one lessons? And at the time, this was, I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago, the time that's kind of when, I know online courses have been on the scene for a while, but I feel like they've like really started to ramp up in the last 4 or 5 years. And when it was around this time, I was starting to see people talk about like, taking your one-on-one expertise and turning it into a course. Yep. And that was like really attractive to me, to be able to be like, wow, I could actually like make my business expand without taking on more students. So I really just kind of started seeing the potential of going towards a course. And at the time I was like, I really don't necessarily want to create a course for kids. Like, I feel like people are going to be more like adults are going to be more likely to buy an online course that they can go through. So that's kind of when I started to shift my student a little bit towards adults who wanted to learn, because I wanted to eventually build out this course and expand my business that way.
Got it. Now, one, I think, important kind of thing in your story here is we didn't go to school for music.
Yes.
And so you're creating this, this course from scratch with your own material and your own content and honestly, your own pedagogical approach to things.
Yeah.
How are you forming that, or what were you doing to, maybe it was education or maybe it was other kind of resources, but how are you informing this as you're starting from scratch with a newer ideal student for you?
Yeah. Honestly, I did a lot of trial and error with my students, and I got really curious with figuring out like what is working, like what's clicking, what's making sense, where are your roadblocks, what's holding you back. And so after teaching so many beginner students, you kind of start to get a sense of like, okay, here are like the typical things that students aren't getting. They're holding them back. Here are like the typical frustrations. Here here are the things, here's where they want to go, but they can't get there because of this. So to me, it was kind of like a puzzle to solve, to see those things and be like, okay, how can we make it so that these things aren't as hard? Like, how can we break these things down so that they're not obstacles? Like, how can we break things down into a way that they're going to understand and really be able to retain? So my whole approach has been just being curious about what works and what doesn't work. And through that process of teaching students and then through creating an online course and getting feedback, I've really been able to hone in on like a really, really simplified pathway of like, okay, do this little bite-sized thing and then add on this little bite-sized thing. And don't do this yet. Like, we're not ready for that. You're going to get overwhelmed if you do that. Like, so I've really been able to like break down the steps into things that feel like attainable and achievable. So that has been, something that nobody's really taught me. It's just like what I've discovered along the way.
That is awesome. And the sequencing is hard. I mean, you built out this whole curriculum yourself. Yeah. And even when I look, and I think this is something that all musicians can relate to, you look at the method books and there's always things that are really strong in a certain method book. And then the next one might have strengths in another area. Yeah. And like, sometimes I wish I could just like mash them all together and like make one perfect method book. But like at the same time, it's a lot of time and energy and effort. And the method book that would be the perfect book and my conglomeration would not be the next teacher's. And so it's such a hard balance. Having something that is purely yours, that you have refined over so much time. I'm sure, I mean, first of all, you have to be immensely proud of that work. That's just remarkable. But at the same time, to have that in that continuous refinement so that your students also have a voice around that and they're getting what they need is so cool. Yeah. When you say you're getting student feedback, what does that look like? How are you checking in, or, at what point, since it is an online course and maybe a little bit more hands off, how do you collect that feedback and know when to adjust? Yeah.
So I usually send a Google form survey to past students, just to see like how things have been going, what has been like some of their biggest wins, what were some things that maybe you'd like to see in some updates. So just really being open to hear from them, because they are like real life people going through the material. It's easy to just kind of like hypothesize about, somebody going through it. But when somebody real is going through it, it's always interesting to hear like what their thoughts are. And sometimes it's surprising and sometimes it's things you would expect, but mostly just through a survey that I send out to students after they've gone through the course.
That's awesome. Yeah. And when students are going through the course, obviously most of them are starting at like pure beginner, no experience. Yeah. By the time that they finish this first set of material, what are they usually playing? What are they working on? Kind of what level do they come out after a course like this?
Yeah. So the goal and the hope is that they will come out with just the confidence to be able to play songs that they love on the piano, and to be able to sit down at any piano and just always have something that they're excited to play, whether that's using chords or reading beginner sheet music or using lead sheets. Basically inside the course, I teach like these different song tools. And then when there's a song that you want to learn how to play, you know exactly how to learn it. Like you don't have to search YouTube for like a good tutorial that's going to be at your level. You know exactly how to take the song tools and to start learning a song. So basically what I want people to leave with is musical freedom, to know that like the songs that they want to play, they have the ability to learn. And it doesn't have to be like this super advanced version of it that they're going to perform or anything. But, you know, oftentimes success is just, being able to play even like the first part of a song that you like, you know, just that satisfaction of like, I did it, like, and it sounds good. So that's what students end up leaving the course with.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's interesting, like comparing, you know, kind of a traditional Western art music, kind of classical music background, where my joke always, and this is still so true, like painfully true, like I never learned jazz.
Yeah.
And it was because my own teachers growing up, it wasn't really where their passion and focus and skill set was. And now at this point in my life, you know, by the time I got to like high school, I wasn't even going to try.
Yeah.
Like I didn't learn to improvise, didn't learn to play independently. And like my personality is if I don't think I'm going to be halfway decent at it on the first go, we're just not even going to bother. So we just skip it. And now I'm at a point where like, I'm never going to improvise in front of someone. I mean, I say that, but like, ideally someday I'll learn, I will, but it's hard to break out of that path. And so to have something that is so geared towards, you know, the music people want to learn. Yeah. You know, I kind of say all the time too, that for every single teacher, there's an ideal student, but for every student, there's an ideal teacher. Yes. And there are so many adults that want these skills. Yeah. And, you know, to hand that to them on basically on a silver platter, like here's exactly the building blocks that you need is amazing.
Yeah. Yes. It's been amazing. And it's been so interesting to see in that process, you know, going into it, I had an idea of what success was. I had this idea like, okay, these people want to play the piano, so I need to teach them everything about playing the piano, and they need to know all these things about theory, and they need to know like how to play classical music and fur-elise, and like, you know, I had all these expectations. And then you get into it and realize they, you know, my ideal student just wants the satisfaction of being able to like sit down and play something with confidence and to be able to enjoy it. And maybe later they'll go on and learn all the, you know, ins and outs of theory, maybe, or maybe not. And so I think like being able to, just like really focus on what is their end goal? Like what does success look like for them and how can I lead them there, has been really like my main goal through all of this. Like, how can I get you there in the simplest way possible so that you can accomplish this goal and this dream?
That's awesome. Do you find in middle school when you kind of had this pivot of now I want to play less classical music, not saying that of course it was completely eliminated by any means, but I want to focus more on, you know, what I'm hearing on the radio or show tunes and things like that. And not as a judgment of all, but did you at all, but did you have a teacher that was on board with that? Did they kind of foster that change?
Yeah, kind of. I'm trying to think, like we would work out of books that we did a lot of like Christian arrangements of songs that I enjoyed. But for like the songs that, for like the pop songs and stuff, we would do some, but most of that was just kind of me taking what I had learned in lessons and just applying it into the songs that I wanted to play. Yeah. So it was like a little bit like she was on board. Like if there was a specific song, I could come to her and ask her. But otherwise we kind of just worked through books. But I found that like to be, once I had discovered like, oh, I can play music that I like, then I was a lot more motivated to even work on other things because it was like, oh, this is just, you know, this is going to improve my skills so that I can play the music that I want to play.
I remember when I probably was in middle school too, in my own piano lessons. I don't know what possessed me, but Fields of Gold, the Eva Cassidy version specifically, like I loved that song. And and I loved Eva Cassidy in general. Went through like a whole year where like, that was like most of what I was listening to, which feels so bizarre. weird kid. That was me. But
I mean, we all have
music
things.
kids. So I like went and figured out on the piano, like listened to it on repeated a bajillion times and like figured out how to play it and did my own little arrangement of the whole thing and brought it to my lesson. I worked on it for weeks, then brought it to my teacher and I was like, you're not going to believe this. And I played it all. I could still to this day probably play that piece for you.
Oh,
it was like the one thing that like I had completely taught myself by ear. I was so excited about it. And so now, because it brought me so much joy, and not to say that the work that I was doing in more classical stuff wasn't. I mean, obviously I went on and got degrees in it. Obviously I liked it, but that felt like my creation. As opposed to somebody else's, like my achievement. And so I try to help my own students do this, but I love what you're doing so much because I think it puts that control back in a student's hand where like they could sit down and figure it out if they wanted to. And that's so stinking cool.
Yeah. I love that part
awesome.
of it.
So now you're an entrepreneur. Whoops. We ended up here. Kind of a wild few years. So at what point did the Piano Path like officially go on the market, and how were you spreading the word that you had this awesome new course?
Yeah. So I actually didn't start with creating the course. I started first with this idea to build an audience around playing the piano as an adult. So it started, it had been like in the back of my head for a while, but I hadn't really taken any action on it until I think it was 2020 that everybody's plans went up in the air.
Time.
Yeah. So it forced me into online teaching with my own students. And I think that just kind of figuring out like the tech of even, it sounds like so silly now, but like the tech of even like how to record your hands playing, which I knew was something that I was going to have to do for an online course. It forced me to like figure that out because I was doing that as I was teaching. So I think that was kind of the push that I needed to be like, okay, this is time. Like I've had this idea in the back of my head to kind of start creating content, to create a course. I think I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to start. So that was about at the beginning of 2020 is kind of when I started. I started with,
that's awesome.
I started with a YouTube channel and then eventually went into Instagram and now TikTok and that's when it started.
That is awesome. And so for anyone that's listening, again, that's not totally familiar, it's just at the Piano Path on TikTok and Instagram and also on YouTube, I think.
Yes. It's just, the Piano Path. Yep.
And the content that you turn out is amazing and it's so creative and you've got such an incredible variety. As you started to create content around this and build an audience, I'm sure there's a million things, but what didn't work for you? Like, what did you try that was like a complete failure that you're like, I'm never doing that again? It obviously didn't work.
Oh, well, here's the thing. You go in thinking that you know what you're doing and then you realize that you don't, but yet you learn so much just by getting into motion, just by getting into action. And I think that we go into things thinking like, oh my gosh, I have to have this perfect plan and I have to know what I'm doing. And no, you don't. you don't know what you don't know. And so like starting for me was like, that was like the turning point, like just like saying that I'm going to start. And then all the things that I learned along the way, like, for example, I thought that I knew who my target student was, like an adult starting from scratch. And so I started creating all of this like beginner content around playing the piano. Like, okay, it needs to be like really simple. So I'm just going to talk about things like how to read music and the treble clef and the bass clef and, quarter notes and half notes. And so I started creating content around that, but I realized that actually the type of student I was attracting with my content was somebody who had already started because they could understand those things. They could understand like treble clef, bass clef, quarter notes, half notes, right? And what I discovered in the process was actually like the ideal student that I want to reach is somebody who like has almost no background in music. So it's almost like when I would start talking about those things, it's like they didn't have a context for even understanding what does this even mean? And it was really telling one day. Actually, my friend Megan was like looking at my sheet music, and she's always wanted to play the piano, but doesn't really have any musical background. I remember her looking at my sheet of music and being like, "How do you make sense of all like these like shapes and dots?" And it just like occurred to me. I'm like, people who have no like musical experience, like they don't have the language to even understand, what even these most basic things are, right? And so that was a big learning for me along the way, is that I started out creating content that I thought would be helpful for this student. But then I realized like, oh, actually I need to like back up and like simplify it even more. And like, they're not even ready to read sheet music. Like they just need to know like the names of the keys and they need to know like their finger numbers. And like, that's where they are. So I think, a huge learning for me is just like learning how to talk directly to where my like ideal student is, to know, what are their pain points? Like, what are the things that are tripping them up, and how can I speak directly to them instead of speaking over their heads?
That makes total sense. Yeah. And I think the content I pull up your account all the time when I want to talk like TikTok and short form video with clients. I pull it up as an example because I think you do such a good job of all of this. But in your content, you have a lot of those like over the hand shots where you're showing examples, but there's also so much of your face in that content too. It's like this wonderful, bright, smiling, warm personality attached to the whole thing, where if someone's afraid to start, you just do such a great job of making it feel inclusive. Yeah. Because again, like people that don't have the language around music, things that feel so second nature to anyone that's been taking lessons since they were 6 years old, whether they have a degree or whether they're working in music, like there's that baseline vocabulary that we all share. Yeah. But not everyone has that. Or like they learned it in elementary music class, but they weren't really paying attention because they didn't really care at the time. And now they've lost it. It would be like going to Taiwan and teaching English to someone that has absolutely no vocabulary. Exactly. It's a challenge. You have to totally strip it down and start from the beginning. So now what kind of content do you feel does the best? Like what do your students really resonate with and what do they want to see from you?
Yeah, I think when I can break something down into a really like digestible piece that makes them feel like, the point with all my content is I hope that people will watch it and say, I can do that. Like that, like she's made it simple enough that I can do that. Like I could go to my piano and try that right now. So I think that like my content that ends up doing the best is content where I just show them how to do something very simply so that they end up with the feeling of, I want to save this. I want to watch this later. I want to try it. I'm excited to try it. And ultimately, like that's the content that I'm most excited to share too, because for people who, have always wanted to play, but, maybe have never gotten the chance or have felt intimidated, like it just feels like an open invitation. Like, hey, you don't have to sit on the sidelines anymore. Like you can come in here. Like you can do this. Yep. Like you're able to. So that kind of content feels really exciting to me. To create and then to watch people interact with. I think also another type of content that I really enjoy creating is when I can do like thought reversals and help people like see things from a different perspective. Like, hey, you always like, maybe you have this thought that like you have to, practice every day for an hour, and that's what's holding you back because you don't have an hour a day to practice, right? And then like, I love coming in and being able to be like, actually, like there are simpler ways to practice. So you don't have to spend such a long time practicing. Like actually, if you focus on the right things, you don't have to spend an hour, So I love doing those like thought reversals to like change people's perspective on things, because ultimately like people aren't going to change their actions until they change their thoughts. And if you can help like change people's thoughts, then you can lead them into action. And so it really doesn't always serve them if you're just like, here's the action to take, without changing their thoughts. So I love to kind of combine both of those, like practical ways to get started, but also like weave in like, here's how you can actually change your perspective on it in order to take action.
Well, and this is something I think that even our younger students, like our little students in private lessons struggle with a lot too, where okay, I was reading your website over the weekend and like kind of going through everything and getting prepared for today. And there was this one testimonial that really stuck out to me. And the student was saying, you know, her idea of only practicing 20 minutes a day was amazing and like life-changing. And I remember when I was teaching piano years ago, I would tell my students, especially for the little ones, I would tell mom and dad, any contact with the instrument is good contact. I don't care what it is. It doesn't have to be a song. It doesn't have to sound good. As long as they're not damaging the instrument, like, they can go in there and like key mash all they want. Because if they are going of their own free will and volition to the instrument to touch it, we are thrilled. Like that's exactly what we want, is them just finding that own gratification.
Yeah.
But as we get to adulthood, like we said, if we're not going to do it perfectly the first time, we're just not going to try it. We all get so guarded that way as adults. And so working with adults in this way to kind of open their eyes that it's okay to be bad at something. It's okay to not know. It's okay to just try it a little bit and see if you like it is such a cool experience for them. Speaking of which, the short form content and video creation, when you first started that, was it scary?
Yes. It was very scary. I first started on YouTube, and I remember the very first YouTube video I created, I was like, oh my gosh, this took me forever to record, and then it took me forever to edit, and then you upload it to a brand new YouTube account and it gets like 8 views, and you're like, cool, I spent all this time on it, and it's like,
no one will ever see this.
And so I was doing YouTube and like just kind of plugging away at it, not really seeing much success. And at the time, Reels were brand new on Instagram, and everybody was talking about it like it was this, amazing thing that was going to like blow up your account overnight, like, oh, just create a reel and you're going to get like thousands of followers. I don't know if you remember that when it first happened, but anyway, I was like, oh, okay, I got to create reels. So I remember the first couple of reels I created just being like, okay, this is it. This is it. I mean, I am like going to blow up after these reels.
Watch me take off, everyone. Here's my rise to fame.
So just like pouring my heart and soul into this content. And then it just like, nah, it doesn't feel like I thought. And it was a really kind of rude awakening to like, okay, yes, I want to believe that, short form video content can help grow my account and grow my business, but it's not necessarily going to happen overnight. Like, I'm not just going to like wake up and be an expert at it. Like with all things, we know this, we have to preach this to ourselves, is like, it takes practice and putting yourself out there and consistency and being willing to put out imperfect work too. Like being able to say like, this isn't perfect, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. Like that. Yeah, it just takes a lot of vulnerability. And so I've learned a lot of that in the process. And like, as I've put out more content, it's gotten better. And that's been really exciting to see. And just like a testament of like, when you stick with something and you just keep doing it, you're going to get better at it.
It feels so counterintuitive. Like, we're all musicians. We all
know this.
We know, like, we've spent since the age of 6 working on our instrument and working on our career and building this whole life. And it's like ironic and yet also a little painful when you think about like someone can start a medical degree and decide while they're in college that they want to go be a doctor. Yeah. And like at the age of 20, they just get to start that path. And of course they've taken science classes all throughout school and everything, and they're going to put an absurd amount of time and energy into that. But at the same time, like, I remember my friends who were in undergrad and weren't music majors, what their homework load looked like compared to my homework load plus my practicing. And it was frustrating at the time. I'm like, how they're just done. And now I'm done with my homework, but I wrote my history paper. Now I got to go practice for like 5 more hours. And that was exhausting. And yet, even with all of that trial and error, and after years and years of practicing and like trying those things independently, even after years of like playing your own music and putting together your own sheet music, when you start something new, it's like you revert back to that. Like, if it's not going to be good, I just might as well not do it, which is funny and also very uncomfortable for everyone at the same time. So in those moments where like you're trying, you're putting content out, it's getting 8 views, it's frustrating, it's not working the way you thought. Like, what kept you going in all of that? Because at this point, I mean, if you guys haven't looked at her account yet, definitely like hit pause right now. The Piano Path on Instagram is just shy of 70,000 followers. Like, this is a big account. Like, you've done great work. Obviously, you didn't quit. Why? How did you keep going?
Yeah. I think I had a really clear picture of what I wanted. And I had a clear picture of where I was going. And I am a huge advocate for journaling. And honestly, this may sound silly, but like that's one of like the main things that like I attribute to my success is because like I have been journaling about these things, like creating a business where I sell digital products and creating a business where I make money from YouTube. Like I have been writing about that in my journal for years. And so, yeah, so I think it was just like the fact that like I was consistently telling myself like, this is happening, this is where I'm going, which takes a lot of like personal, like it's been so many things I've learned along the way, but like to be able to stand in that when it's not yet a reality, like to be like, this is what I'm doing, even though I only have 100 people following me on Instagram right now, like I'm going to keep going because I like believe that, you know, like believe in what's coming. Has really been, I think what kept me going was I knew what I wanted to build. I wanted to create a business with time and financial freedom, and I wanted to make impact. And so that I just knew that that's where I was headed. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going home. So we're just going to keep going. So yeah, it was, I think that that's what like kept me going was like having a really clear picture of where I was going.
I think every time you make a change, you know, the first step obviously deciding that you want to change, but also deciding that you're no matter what going to follow through.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know you also now coach other musicians to do what you did and build the online course and to do this over social media. And as we talked about the mindset being that first part, you have to get your head in that space of no matter what happens, like even on the days where it feels really crappy, even on the days where like I post the video and it gets 8 views, I'm still going to wake up tomorrow and keep trying.
Yes.
It's hard.
Yeah, it is. And actually one of my friends just told me this quote recently, like staying committed to the goal, but not attached to the results. And it's really helped me to think about like, you know, even in those moments where I had this really clear picture of where I was going, I also had to sit with just kind of this like open-handedness of like, you know, this may lead me to this end goal that I'm envisioning, or it may lead me somewhere else, somewhere completely unexpected and new that I didn't even expect. But like having that like faith and that trust to know like, anytime that I learn something new, anytime that I step outside of my comfort zone, anytime I like expand myself, it's going to lead me to a new reality. And like that to me was so exciting to be like, I'm creating like my future. Like I'm creating something new and wonderful. And even if like it turned out differently than I thought. And that has brought me a lot of peace over time, just to know that like, even if things turn out differently than I thought, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be.
It's different when you follow your passion to reach your goals than like set the goal and then try to like cram your passion inside of that. And I think that's what a lot of musicians are doing is like we look for the doors that we can step through as opposed to like where does our passion take us and what doors appear organically when that's happening. But it is a challenge, you know, when you're trying to like make a living as a musician, which is not the most straightforward endeavor on the planet. There are a lot of like traditional things that you can do or like opportunities that can come up, and not every single thing is for you. And that's also okay. It's okay to say no to stuff. In your own business, I know you probably have iterated on so many of the things that you're doing countless times, but what are some things that today, as it stands in your business, look different than you thought they were going to 3 or 4 years ago?
I think that, I think I'd have to think about that for a little bit.
Well, here's maybe an obvious one. Did you ever think that you were going to be on TikTok like 4 years ago? Not
Here's the
dancing?
thing. I am a terrible dancer, like terrible. So no, I never thought I would be on TikTok because I thought everybody on TikTok was just like dancing. So yes, TikTok is very different. I did not imagine TikTok, but I think like also that's like part of the game too with being a content creator is like social media is constantly changing. You know, like right now I'm on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, but you know, like 5 years from now, that could be totally different. Like I could be on different platforms, like, and so you kind of just have to adapt as you go, which yeah, it's just always new and exciting, but it's kind of the name of the game. Like you always constantly changing and growing with it.
Are there things that you like better about each platform, or like where do you typically hang out? If you're just going to scroll at the end of the night, where do you go?
I usually am on Instagram. I really like the stories feature on Instagram because it feels like you really get like a behind the scenes view into what people are doing. And yeah, I typically like having like a variety of videos and pictures. TikTok is fun, but sometimes it's just like, it's like right in your face sometimes. But yeah, it's always exciting to me to see like so many different types of content. And that's actually how I got a lot of inspiration, is just seeing like what other people are posting. Like, you know, there's a lot of like educational type content. And then there's a lot of like kind of like the B-roll footage where somebody like just have words on this screen. Or, you know, maybe somebody's like telling a story, voiceover showing different shots. And I don't know, it's so cool to see how creative people are. And there's not like a one size fits all with content. Like you can really, it feels like a playground a little bit. Like you get to just like try new things and see what works and what you like creating. So yeah, I guess like I enjoy probably scrolling on Instagram the most.
What's fun about doing the content creation too, and I think it's been a little over a year now that we've like actively been trying to like make reels and do video content like this. When we first started, I just did like voiceover stuff because that was, I think, the most popular, especially on Instagram at that time. I hated it. It. Like we would record 3 or 4 and I'm not even being dramatic in the fact that like I would start crying. Like Isaac was like, okay, I guess we're done for the day. Cause I was like, I'm so tired of like having to get the words exactly with the other person. And like, it's so exhausting and it feels so disingenuous. This is not who I am. And I don't want to do this. And as we got out of that and just like started talking and telling more stories, it feels so much better.
Yeah.
But like, also, I'm glad that I tried that thing and knew that it was horrible and I didn't like it. Because that might not be the case for everybody, of course. But you have to just try a bunch of stuff. It's like just throw it all at the wall and see what sticks. Yeah. We're still figuring that out. But it's fun. Yeah. Is there a type of content that you enjoy making the most? Like you look forward to making on a regular basis?
I'm really into just educational type reels right now, like where I'm talking to the camera, where I'm just giving them a quick tip or showing them how to do something. I really enjoy that. And then people can usually like feel the energy and excitement of what I'm saying and can kind of, you know, obviously like learn something from what I'm sharing, but also like take that energy and be like, oh, like I want to keep learning more, like get people interested and motivated in learning.
That's awesome. That is awesome. What is something in general in learning piano that you think at any stage, it doesn't have to just be adults, what do you think is something that's a little bit underrated about either the instrument or like what it's capable of for people that want something that maybe is a little bit more versatile?
Yeah, I think just being able to like play around with things like, I'm a big fan of just like improvising with chords, even like just taking like 4 basic chords and just being able to kind of just do what you want with them. Just like play around with notes, see what sounds good. And I think that, you know, the way music is traditionally taught is, you know, like you learn how to read sheet music and, you know, maybe you add chords in later. But it's very like kind of by the books in a way. And I just love the idea of like improvising because you're getting to play with it a little bit more, and you're getting to like give yourself the freedom to just like, I'll just try it. Like,
yeah,
who knows? Maybe it'll sound terrible. Maybe it'll sound amazing. Maybe I'll love this sequence of notes, you know,
and
just
if
like
nobody else hears it, who cares?
yeah, just like giving yourself the freedom to do that. And not to like put this expectation on ourselves of like, oh my gosh, I have to play like the exact notes on the page and it has to sound good. And with improvisation, it's like you don't really have any of that. You're just playing. And I think that that's something really fun to revisit as an adult, because we did this as kids, and you know, we kind of had that like, you know, the world is my oyster sort of thing, you know, like not even like aware of our limitations. And then as we get older, that, you know, tends to fade a little bit more. So like being able to return to that through improvisation, I think is really cool.
That's awesome. Do you find that a lot of your students take that and end up writing their own music out of it too?
I haven't heard of too many writing their own music, but I hope so. I hope they take it and like create, you know, their own things, and get to experience that part of playing, because
that's really awesome. What is something about having an online business that you maybe enjoy more than you thought you were going to?
Yeah, I really enjoy not like, I guess just having the freedom, like the time freedom to kind of like wake up and be like, okay, what am I going to create today? That's going to be like different and unique. And then like being able to package that into digital products that people can buy. So I get like all of the joy and the excitement of creating it, but I only have to create it once instead of, you know, like with private lessons, you teach it and then you teach it again and then you teach it again, and the same thing over and over again. So I think it's kind of fun to just like package it all up once with all the excitement and then just be like, send it out into the world.
Do you find that you have like, do you have a typical routine? I mean, obviously since you're working independently, you have all the time freedom. Is there a set schedule that you normally follow to help kind of organize that a little bit more for yourself?
Yeah, I try to be really intentional at the beginning of the week with like that week's tasks. So, and then like breaking it down into day by day, but keeping that like overarching, like these are the week's tasks and I have the whole week to complete them, so that I, you know, if I get to the end of the day and I haven't completed everything, I'm like, oh, it's okay, because I have the whole week
to stress.
Yeah, not to stress over them. I love having a morning routine. I love being able to wake up and journal. I'm a huge fan of journaling. And just like drinking my coffee, getting set up for the day. And then I try to create all of my content, whether it's writing or creating reels or carousels. I try to do that all in the mornings because I'm like the freshest and the light is the best in my music room then. So I try to get it all done in the morning and then try to do more of like my admin or like behind the scenes stuff like online in the afternoons when it's kind of like the lull till the end of the day. So that's kind of a rough structure of my schedule throughout the days, but it's always kind of changing a little bit from day to day.
When you first started, and I'm sure you were like trying to create a lot of content and record everything, did you find that you were working more days than you weren't? Like, were you also packing stuff in on the weekends, or did you have that good separation initially too?
Oh no, I was working all the time because at the time I was still teaching one-on-one. And so I no longer teach one-on-one. So like as my online business grew, I stopped teaching one-on-one and now just like completely focus on my online business. But while I was getting this up and running, I was still like one-on-ones were still my bread and butter of my business. So I was teaching there, and then I was also trying to create content, also trying to record my course. Like it was a lot. So I really feel like I'm living the dream now, like just being able to like focus on creating content and building out my courses. So that's been really nice.
It's hard, and I think it's something that we don't expect initially. Like we know it's going to be work, and then all of a sudden, like, gosh, I can picture like around the time when I was like still teaching a very full studio and trying to balance all this, where like it was 7 days a week every week, like without fail. You know, I was taking calls on a Sunday, and it's so stressful. And it's hard to pull back from that. So as you've kind of gotten into the groove and things have taken off and you've really settled into just the online business, how do you find that balance, or how do you set those boundaries? And, what are some things that have kind of helped you create that structure for yourself?
Yeah, it's been really hard for me to cut myself off at the end of the day, because I'm a little bit of a workaholic. Like, I would work just because there's always when you have your own business, there are always things to do. Like, the to-do list is never done. I could finish my to-do list for today and be like, oh, but there are 5 other things that I could do, so I've had to come to the realization, like, that will always be there. I will always have a to-do list, and, the work that I get done during the day, it's enough, and I deserve to rest. And I find that I create my best work out of, like, when I've rested, when I've looked after myself, when I've cut myself off at the night and said, nope, I'm done working. I'm going to enjoy time with my family. I'm going to color and watch TV. Like, I find that, like, I have to be really intentional about that. And just to realize, like, my business is still going to grow, even if, I take a break, and that these breaks are really important. So yeah, so I feel like I've had to be really intentional about cutting things off at the end of the day. And this is something that has been really hard for me, because otherwise I will just keep working. But then I get led into, like, working out of frustration and be feeling frazzled, and I never create good things out of that. Like, nothing really, I mean, I can force myself to do it, but it always, like, takes me longer, doesn't feel as authentic. I'm not happy. So I've learned to just cut myself off and get rest, to prioritize rest. And yeah, it's been crazy to see my business grow, like, even with me taking rest. And so it's just like a testament to the importance of rest and taking breaks.
Being fully present.
Yes.
When you have that separation, are there self-care things that you've implemented over the last year or two that have made a difference in feeling more rested?
Yeah. So I actually started coloring recently in an adult coloring book.
Oh, I love that.
And yeah, it's actually really, it's been an experience for me. I feel like it's been this whole, like, growing experience for me, because I've actually had adult coloring books, like, for years. And it was one of those things where it was like, oh, when I have time, I'll do it. Well, I never had the time. Yeah, I never had the time. Right. And so but I found that when I opened them up to color, I was like, it wasn't actually fun for me to color, because I was bringing into my coloring experience kind of the same mindset that I had in my business, where it was like, it has to be perfect. Like, I have to make sure that, like, I'm all within the lines and all the colors coordinate. And so it was stressful. I'm like, this is supposed to be fun, and it's stressful. I am not having a good time. And so recently, like, within the past couple of months, I have just told myself, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I color within the lines. It doesn't matter if I want to do pink here and purple here. It doesn't matter if it looks good. Like, this is just something that's fun for me to do. So just, like, it's just like the act of coloring in the pages that has been really just life-giving for me. So that's been a whole experience, but it's kind of a fun, like, evening routine that I now have, where I usually, like, turn on, like, Parks and Rec or The Office, and I just, because, I've seen all of them already, and I'm just kind of,
like,
just watch.
Funny background noise. Yep.
Yeah, you can just watch as I'm coloring, and it's amazing. I've really, really loved it. So that's kind of been my new, like, thing that I do, and it's been a fun routine to look forward to.
Oh, that's awesome. It's important to have things too that, like, physically separate you from your phone and your computer.
Yes.
Like, that is a struggle for me. Like, I remember about a year and a half ago, just a little shy, when Isaac and I got married. Yeah. For that week, we had an assistant that had been working with us for a couple months. I turned everything over to her for that week, which was terrifying. Like, absolutely terrifying. She knocked it out of the park. We ended up hiring her full-time right afterwards. It was great. But, like, that week, I turned everything over, and I turned off all of my notifications, like social media, email, text, everything got turned off. And it was so uncomfortable, like, to physically do that to my phone. And then I, like, never turned some of them back on. Like, I still have all of my social media notifications turned off, my email notifications turned off. My texts come through, but my family jokes that I'm on Do Not Disturb more times during the day that I'm not. But I like that separation. I don't want that like constant input, because I'm going to check, we have a Facebook group for our clients. Like, I'm going to check Facebook.
Yeah.
I'm going to check my email. I check them constantly throughout the day.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing something else, I don't want that reminder. Or you don't want to be at family dinner on a Sunday and get an email from a parent or something about the week that causes stress, and it totally ruins that experience.
Yeah, it can
just happens.
It can just like throw you in the moment.
Yeah.
And then you just,
Yep.
I totally get that.
It's hard, and especially when you're running an online business, everyone's communicating with you via email.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've gotten those too, where it's like, you're sitting down to do something that you absolutely love, and you get that one grumpy email, and like your whole world is set off its access, and you can't even think about what's in front of you or who's in front of you.
Yeah.
And those moments are like really deeply hurtful, and also really inspiring for like creating that separation and creating those boundaries so that you can kind of steel yourself up a little bit.
Yes.
And find that. Are there, so I talked about turning off notifications. Are there other things that help you to create that separation so that you can enjoy the other part of your life that is not music?
Yeah. I think, I try not to scroll in the evenings. I mean, that's kind of related to what we were just talking about, but I try to just leave because I find that when I scroll, like right before I go to bed, it's hard for me to fall asleep, because then I get like a bunch of ideas of things I need to do the next day. And then it's like, no, but I got to sleep. And so
I want to make this one and this one and this one. Yeah.
So I found like like keeping my phone, for a while, actually, I was just like leaving it outside of my bedroom, which was really nice. Just to like have that habit of like, I want it outside of my bedroom. I don't want it close to me as I'm like going to bed. Having habits like that where I'm not scrolling before I go to bed, I think has been really helpful for me. And then sometimes I'll just like take a day and just like not go on Instagram, like just have a separation, like just have a break day, where I just like think about other things. And because it can get really easy when you're so close to your business, it can feel like so much of your life. It can just feel like very, very connected. And I love my business and I love what I do, but at the end of the day, like I want to have a life outside of my business. Like I want my business to be like what is providing me the freedom to go out and do other things. And so, just doing different things like, having a separate day where I'm not online, I think has been helpful in creating that separation and just resting and rejuvenating and just like reconnecting with like who I am, my purpose. And sometimes you can look like all around you at like, oh, what are other people doing? Am I doing enough? Like, or, or nobody's commenting on this. Am I not doing enough? Like, you can look at all these like external factors and be like, it's like your thermometer for how you're doing. And if you're always doing that, then your business is like it's a whirlwind and it's an up and down roller coaster. But if you can stay really grounded, for me, I found if I can stay really grounded through like journaling, through turning things off, through giving myself rest, I just have a healthier, more thriving business.
Absolutely. So outside, and part of the problem with this business connection too is that you are on all social media, the piano path. Like that is you are one and the same. So outside of the piano path and outside of music in general, like who is Brianne? What else do you like to do? I mean, some coloring and journaling, like what other things bring you joy that are not your musical life?
Yeah. So I love traveling. And it's a big like reason why I want to create a business too, is for, time freedom to be able to travel. One of my favorite places is Glacier National Park. And we've had the chance to go there the past couple of summers and just have completely fallen in love with it. We're obsessed. We love hiking and we love being out in nature and the mountains. And we live in Indiana where it's like completely flat. So getting to like see mountains is quite a treat. And just really ignites my soul. So being outside in nature, traveling, just exploring new places. Like we always get super excited when there's like a new coffee shop or a new restaurant that's opening, like, oh, we got to go check it out. Like I just love experiencing new things. Experiences are my absolute favorite things. I also love reading and reading novels. This is something I started doing recently too, was reading more novels, and just like getting really engrossed in a good story. Because for a while I was just like reading all self-help and development and business books, which are great. But also then I'm like, I'm only thinking about my business then through all of this. So just getting lost in a good story. I love that. So at the end of the day, I love exploring. I love stories. I love creating new things. That's really who I am.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think it's so important that we find that definition, because it's hard when you're turning that content all the time, and like that's what your followers expect. That's what your students expect. Yeah. That's what they're looking for from you. It's hard to honor that part of you that is not just music.
Yeah.
And that separation is a little painful.
Yeah.
In so much what we do, we like define ourselves that way too. Yeah. You've worked in this business for so long. It's hard to not like intertwine that work with how you define yourself.
Yeah.
So it's good to have those other hobbies and experiences.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Brianne, this has been so much fun. And I told you when we first logged on, I was so looking forward to this. I know we've been like social media pals for a while.
Yes,
like,
I know.
Kind of go back and forth. But it was time. It was so time to actually meet face to face and chat. And this has been an absolute blast. It's so nice to meet you. I love what you're doing. I really appreciate how open you have been on the recording today, and just sharing as much as you have about how you got here and all the other things that came with the success. But I have really enjoyed this conversation, and I think maybe we should do it again sometime, because I really enjoyed it.
Yes, definitely.